Bienvenidos a Rony ANALIZA. En este momento estamos presenciando la sesión del Congreso de los Estados Unidos que debe valorar, ratificar y o debatir los resultados de las elecciones presidenciales realizadas el día 3 de noviembre. Como ustedes saben, ya se habría anunciado que varios senadores y varios representantes realizarán impugnaciones a estas certificaciones y de esa manera se abrirá el debate para posteriormente realizar una votación sobre este aspecto. Estamos, por supuesto, bastante atentos a lo que suceda en esta sesión del Congreso, que está siendo, por supuesto, protagonizada, dirigida por Mike Pence, el vicepresidente en funciones de los Estados Unidos, y Nancy Pelosi, la presidenta de la Cámara de Representantes de los Estados Unidos. Recordemos un poco la metodología. Mike Pence empezará a revisar las diferentes certificaciones y una vez que se presente alguna de las oposiciones a las certificaciones, comenzará el debate. El debate puede ser realizado de manera separada, incluso la Cámara de Representantes por su lado y el Senado por su lado realizarán el debate para hablar respecto de los diferentes fundamentos que establecen para las objeciones a las certificaciones. Veremos qué resulta de todo esto. En este momento, por supuesto, es algo muy poco prematuro decir qué es lo que puede llegar a suceder. Como sabemos que los republicanos han estado alegando de manera permanente que no van a conceder las elecciones, y por otro lado los demócratas están bastante claros y bastante bien entendidos de que deben alegar lo que tengan que alegar para poder de esa manera determinar que se respete el voto popular, según lo que dicen los demócratas. Bien, vamos a escuchar ahora al vicepresidente Mike Pence.
The certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Alaska seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 3 votes for president, and Michael R. Pence of the state of Indiana received 3 votes for vice president.
Are there any objections to counting the certificate of vote of the state of Alaska that the teller has verified appears to be regular in form and authentic?
Esta sesión va a durar muchas horas, vamos a ver hasta dónde podemos hacer el seguimiento.
Hearing none, this certificate from Arizona, the parliamentarians advise me, is the only certificate of vote that the state purports to be a return from the state, and that has annexed to it a certificate from an authority of that state purporting to appoint or ascertain electors.
Se certifica Arizona. Ahora va a pedir si es que alguien se opone, objeta.
Mr. President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Arizona seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Joseph R. Biden Jr. of the state of Delaware received 11 votes for president, and Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 11 votes for vice president.
Se anuncia que los demócratas tienen los 11 votos electorales de Arizona.
Are there any objections to counting the certificate of vote of the state of Arizona that the teller has verified appears to be regular in form and authentic?
President, I, Paul Gosar from Arizona.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
I rise for myself and 60 of my colleagues to object to the counting of the electoral ballots from Arizona.
Is the objection in writing and signed by a senator?
Yes, it is.
Ted Cruz, senador de Texas, y el representante de Arizona acaban de levantarse para objetar los votos de Arizona. Primera objeción para los votos electorales de Arizona.
An objection presented in writing and signed by both a representative and a senator complies with the law, Chapter 1 of Title 3 of the United States Code. The clerk will report the objection.
Se cuenta la objeción y se debe iniciar el procedimiento de debate.
Objection to counting the electoral votes of the state of Arizona. We, a member of the House of Representatives and a United States Senator, object to the counting of the electoral votes of the state of Arizona on the ground that they were not, under all of the known circumstances, regularly given.
Are there further objections to the certificates from the state of Arizona? The chair hears none. The two houses will withdraw from joint session. Each house will deliberate separately on the pending objection and report its decision back to the joint session. The Senate will now retire to its chamber.
Muy bien, ahora se ha decidido que el Senado debe retirarse a realizar un debate por su parte, por su lado. Ahora los senadores van a acudir a la sala anexa para poder hacer en el Senado el debate sobre la situación de la certificación del estado de Arizona. Habíamos visto que Alaska y Luisiana ya certificaron, y bueno, teníamos ya el tercer estado, y el tercer estado siendo Arizona, ya se determinó el debate. Bien, ahora vamos a ver ya un poco del avance de este debate sobre los resultados en Arizona.
Extra days were added via judicial fiat to allow voter registration. These 10 days were added after voting had already begun. This is completely indefensible. You cannot change the rules of an election while it is underway and expect the American people to
Este
trust
es el
it.
debate en la Cámara de
Now,
Representantes.
in
En
this
este
10-day
momento está
period,
haciendo uso de la
at
palabra
least
Lauren Boebert,
30,000 new
representante
voters
de
registered to
Colorado.
vote in Arizona. All of these votes are unconstitutional. It does not matter if they voted
Es
for
una
President
representante
Trump or if they
republicana
voted for
que
Vice
se
President
adhiere
Biden.
a
They did
la
not register
objeción.
in time for the election. The law
Escuchemos.
states October 5th. Either we have laws or we do not. If we allow state election laws as set forth by the state legislature to be ignored and manipulated on the whims, partisan lawsuit, unelected bureaucrats,
Order. The House will be in order.
Bastante fuerte
if
la
we allow state election
representante.
laws as set forth by state legislatures to be ignored and manipulated on the whims
Lauren
of partisan
Boebert.
lawsuits, unelected bureaucrats, unlawful procedures, and arbitrary rules, then our constitutional republic will cease to exist. The oath that I took this past Sunday to defend and support the Constitution makes it necessary for me to object to this travesty. Otherwise, the laws passed by the legislative branch merely become suggestions to be accepted, rejected, or
La
manipulated
representante
by those who did
Boebert
not
se
pass
adhiere
them.
a la
Madam
objeción
Speaker, I have constituents
republicana
outside this
a las
building right now. I promise my
elecciones
voters to
en
be
Arizona.
their voice. In this branch of government, which I now serve, it is my separate but equal obligation to weigh in on this election and object. Are we not a government of, by, and for the people? They know that this election is not right, and as their representative, I am sent here to represent them. I will not allow the people to be ignored. Madam Speaker, it is my duty under
Dice
the U.S.
que no va a
Constitution to
dejar
object to the
que
counting
la
of the electoral
población
votes
sea
in the state
ignorada.
of Arizona.
Es su
The members
derecho y
who
su
stand here
deber
today and
representar a la
accept the
población
results of
y
this
por eso
concentrated,
objeta
coordinated,
los resultados de
partisan
Arizona.
effort by Democrats, where every fraudulent vote cancels out the vote of an honest America, has sided with the extremist left. The United States Congress needs to make an informed decision, and that starts with this objection. I yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Brian Mast.
Qué fuerte la representante de Arizona, de
Madam Speaker, I rise as well to
Partido
support the
Republicano.
objection.
Vamos a ver un poco
And I
qué
rise
pasa en
with a
el
simple
Senado.
question.
Veamos qué pasa en el Senado.
Can the chair honestly tell Americans not being
No
allowed to
tenemos
observe
todavía
and
la fuente del
inspect
Senado. Vamos
signatures
a ver ahora a Brian
that
Mast
the laws and
del
constitution
Distrito 18 de
of that
Florida
state were not violated to change voting
se
outcomes.
dirige
Madam Speaker, I will
a la
wait for a
Cámara.
response.
I'm sorry? Gentleman has 25 seconds remaining.
I will repeat my question. Can you honestly tell Americans that with pending Supreme Court case over legal observers not being able to observe and inspect signatures, that the laws and Constitution of Arizona did not be violated to change voting outcomes? And I will wait for a response.
Okay. Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the objection.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, today is an important day. In 1862, during the depths of the Civil War, President Lincoln submitted his annual message
Joe
to Congress,
Negius
to this body.
de Colorado,
And in it, he wrote the
del
following:
segundo distrito de Colorado,
Fellow citizens, we
demócrata,
cannot escape history.
se opone
We
a la
of this
objeción.
Congress and this administration will be remembered in spite of ourselves. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. We shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth. We gather today, Madam Speaker, to ensure the survival of our grand American experiment, the greatest democracy this world has ever known. And there are millions of people watching today's proceedings. The eyes of the world are on us now, my colleagues, wondering if we will keep the faith, wondering if our constitutional republic will hold. Will we adhere to our Constitution, that solemn, visionary document that has guided us so well for so
Se
long
refiere a la
and enabled
Constitución. Joe
the peaceful
Negius,
transfer of power for the
demócrata de
last
Colorado,
230 years?
le preocupa el
Will we
tema
continue to be a country
de la
premised
Constitución y
on
que
the
se debe
consent
respetar
of the governed,
las reglas del
a
juego
Congress
establecidas
that
en la
respects
Constitución y en las
the will of the
normativas
people, and a
electorales.
republic that will endure? Those are the questions before us today, Madam Speaker. With respect to my new colleague from Colorado, the question is not whether Joe Biden was elected the 46th President of the United States. He clearly was. The people of Arizona, like so much of the country, spoke clearly and resoundingly. They voted in record numbers.
Como
And over
demócrata
81
está apoyando
million
a Joe
Americans
Biden
selected Joe
y
Biden
bueno, alega
as the next president. Now,
que se debe
today
respetar el
we
voto
hear from
popular,
some in this chamber,
desestimando
not all,
todas las
but some of my
alegaciones
colleagues on the other side
de
of the aisle,
irregularidades que pudieran haber
vague
existido.
claims of fraud. No substance, no evidence, no facts,
Dice que no hay
no
evidencia, no hay
explanation for why
pruebas.
over 88 judges across this land have rejected the very same claims. Madam Speaker, the bottom line is this.
Dice que
As my
88
colleague,
jueces a lo
Representative
largo de
Raskin,
todo
so
el país
eloquently
han
put it,
rechazado
the
las
people
alegaciones de los
have spoken.
republicanos.
And that is why on December 14th, the Electoral College met to certify the election of a duly elected president, just as they've done for centuries during terrible world wars, recessions, depressions, plagues, and pandemics. They met their duty, and they once again rose to the occasion and certified the election. And the question now is, will we do ours? Now, I know there are many textualists among us, many of my colleagues, who would understand that the Constitution must guide our work today. And the Constitution is crystal clear. Our duty today is a narrow one. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 3 reads, "The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes shall be the President." That's it. Period. Our job is not to replace the judgment made by the American people with our
Dice
own.
que
And yet that is precisely
la
what
lectura
so
de,
many
los,
of my House
de las
and Senate
certificaciones
Republican colleagues
realizadas
ask
por
this
el
body
Congreso
to
es
do,
solamente
to
una
substitute
formalidad.
their judgment
No es
for
tarea
the
del Congreso,
express will
dice,
of the American
que
people.
se cambie la voluntad del pueblo expresada en las elecciones. Solamente se tiene que abrir los sobres de las certificaciones y ya está, y nada más.
And attempt to install a preferred candidate into power. That doesn't happen here. I will close with this. Our duty, our task, is a very simple one: to honor the voice of the people, to honor our Constitution.
Dice que su trabajo es uno muy simple: simplemente honrar la voz del pueblo, honrar las elecciones y el voto popular. Recordemos que este es el representante Joe Negius del estado de Colorado, demócrata.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the objection.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, we have a solemn responsibility today. We must vote to sustain objections to states of electors submitted by states that we genuinely believe clearly violated the Constitution in the presidential election of 2020. This is the threshold legal question before us, and it's an issue before us for the state of Arizona. We got to repeat this for emphasis because a lot of people seem to be confused. Because judges and not the state legislature changed the rules of the election, Arizona clearly violated the plain language of Article 2, Section 1
Este
of
es
the
el representante Mike Johnson del cuarto distrito de Luisiana, republicano, quien está apoyando la objeción a la certificación de Arizona. Dice que es importantísimo que se revisen estas certificaciones porque es un deber de los representantes verificar que la democracia se cumpla.
Were given the authority to direct the manner of appointing presidential electors because it was so important. The Supreme Court has acknowledged this over and over. They previously affirmed in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, quote, "The appointment of these electors is thus placed absolutely and wholly with the legislatures of the several states. That authority can never be taken away or abdicated." The Arizona legislature did enact detailed rules and procedures that state was determined and was supposed to follow to choose its electors. But
Mike Johnson, republicano,
está
mencionando sobre las transgresiones que habrían ocurrido pocos días antes, la modificación de las normas electorales que transgredieron la legislatura del estado de Arizona.
They were changed by judges. And those actions taken by the judiciary were not limited to mere interpretations of existing law. No, they were substantive, wholesale changes to those statutes. That's a usurpation of the authority that the legislature had. That usurpation was repeated across the country this year. It's the primary reason. It's one of the reasons why the election of 2020 became riddled with an unprecedented number of serious allegations of fraud and irregularities all over the country. National polls, as has been said, indicate that a huge percentage of Americans now have serious doubts about not just the outcome of this presidential contest, but also the future reliability of our election system itself.
Dice que existen grandes encuestas que han demostrado que en ese momento la misma población de los Estados Unidos tiene serias dudas sobre la legalidad y la legitimidad de las pasadas elecciones y que adicionalmente a eso le preocupa mucho lo que vaya a suceder en el futuro con el procedimiento electoral y las otras elecciones que se realicen en los Estados Unidos.
Given these inescapable facts, we believe we have no choice today but to vote to sustain objections to those slates of electors. Mr. Raskin and others today have cited the 12th Amendment, and they cite Article 2, Section 1, Clause 3. Remember that, Clause 3, and they've asserted that Congress has only one narrow role today. We're just supposed to count the electoral votes that have been submitted. But those advocates have overlooked a critical first principle. Their assertion is only true so long as Congress first is convinced that the electoral votes that are produced by a process that violated the Constitution
Mike Johnson, republicano de Colorado, nos dice que básicamente lo que se está haciendo es que para poder dar vía libre a las certificaciones, el Congreso tiene que estar seguro de que los votos fueron realizados de manera legal, de manera acorde a las normas electorales. Y es su deber, dice Mike Johnson de Luisiana.
In a per curiam opinion, meaning all 9 justices, it was unanimous. They noted strict adherence to the provisions of the Electoral Count Act may, quote, create a safe harbor for a state insofar as congressional consideration of its electoral votes is concerned. However, they said, unanimously, the court said, since Title III, Section 5 contains a principle of federal law that would assure finality of the state's determination if they followed all the prescriptions there, if a legislature, the will of the legislature is attempted to be changed by a state court, that is a problem. That, they said, Congress might deem to be a change in the law. That's precisely why we're here right now. Go read Bush v. Gore.
Mac Johnson,
you'll
de
see this.
Luisiana, dice que existen normas y procedimientos que deben ser cumplidos para el momento de la presentación de las certificaciones de los resultados electorales, pero que si no se cumple, es un deber y una obligación por parte de los representantes salir adelante y mencionar y oponerse a las certificaciones. Eso es lo que se está
support and defend the Constitution. That's what we do here today. I urge everyone to do the right thing, and I yield back.
Muy bien, vamos a ver rápidamente qué es lo que sucede en el Senado.
From President Trump's totals. The proof is in the counting curves, the curves that cannot occur except with odds so
Estamos
rare and
escuchando al
unlikely
senador,
that winning the Mega Millions lottery
al representante de Arizona.
Madam, Mr. Speaker, can I have order in the chamber?
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Okay. The House will be in order. House will be in order.
Se han retirado una gran cantidad de representantes.
Members will take their seats. The House will be in order.
Bueno, sin lugar a dudas, un momento tenso.
We can get order, we can resume.
Un momento tenso entre los demócratas y los republicanos. Es inevitable que sucedan estos momentos tensos. Se salieron muchos representantes. Vamos a ver qué es lo que sucede. Estamos esperando. Ahí ya tenemos. Sin lugar a duda, bastante complejo el momento. Estaba haciendo uso de la palabra el representante del estado de Arizona, que hizo la objeción a la cual muchos de los representantes republicanos de los diferentes estados se fueron adhiriendo. Pero en este momento estamos viendo una situación un poco incómoda, un poco complicada. No le han permitido al representante terminar con el uso de la palabra.
Without objection, the chair declares the House in recess pursuant to Clause 12B of Rule 1.
El encargado del debate ha tomado la decisión de establecer un receso en la Cámara de Representantes sobre la base de estos. Es que existía un problema, no lo pudieron mostrar en cámara, pero ha existido un problema, un debate. Dice, al parecer hay problemas afuera del Capitolio. Estamos viendo que se reporta algunos incidentes. Ya la policía está haciendo en este momento una valoración de la situación. Bueno, era inevitable que sucedan estos hechos. Vemos en las diferentes fuentes que se ha llamado a un receso en la Cámara de Representantes debido a una serie de complicaciones. Al parecer han logrado entrar, algún conjunto de personas ha logrado entrar a la Cámara de Representantes y bueno, han generado algún conflicto, algún disturbio, y la policía recomendó que se retiren. Momento tenso, tanto por el lado de los demócratas como por el lado de los republicanos. No nos olvidemos que ambos están en este debate permanente para determinar qué es lo que está sucediendo. Ahí vemos las afueras del Capitolio, inundadas de gente. Recordemos que hace un par de horas atrás se había convocado al rally y la marcha, la denominada March to Save America, es decir, la marcha para salvar América, convocada por Donald Trump. Y bueno, toda esa multitud estaba en la Casa Blanca, ahora fue caminando hacia el Capitolio, y el Capitolio está prácticamente atestado de gente en las afueras del Capitolio, y es por eso que se ha determinado la paralización de la sesión del Congreso que estaba haciendo las certificaciones. Yo me pregunto cuáles van a ser las indicaciones. Tienen que determinar hoy en día, hoy mismo tienen que hacer la finalización de las certificaciones, ¿no es cierto? Y recordemos que solamente se certificaron 2 estados, Alabama y Alaska. Alabama con sus 9 votos electorales a favor de Donald Trump, y Alaska con sus 3 votos electorales a favor de Donald Trump. El tercer estado que le tocaba era Arizona, y ahí vino la objeción por parte de un miembro de la Cámara de Representantes del estado de Arizona, apoyado por un senador, el senador Ted Cruz del estado de Texas, y comenzó el debate separado. Como ustedes saben, el Senado fue a debatir por su lado, la Cámara de Representantes por su lado, pero mientras se estaba haciendo este debate, hasta más o menos unos 5 minutos atrás, se produjo ahí algún incidente, no se mostró en cámaras, se produjo un incidente y esto provocó que una cantidad enorme de representantes se salgan de la cámara, y la policía al parecer habría sugerido que también se retiren, porque es una cantidad enorme de personas las que se encuentran a las afueras del Capitolio. Qué complicado. Era al parecer una situación inevitable que vaya a suceder esto en esta tan polémica situación de la certificación de los resultados de las elecciones del pasado 3 de noviembre para la determinación de quién es el futuro presidente de los Estados Unidos. Como sabemos, Joe Biden ganó las certificaciones y los republicanos quieren impugnar, y ahí vemos estas miles de personas que se han acercado al Capitolio para, me imagino, hacer algún tipo de presión. Qué complejo. Vamos a ver qué es lo que sucede, veamos qué es lo que sucede al interior. Veamos la interpretación aquí de la Cámara del Senado. Vamos a ver el Senado brevemente. Escuchemos el audio del senador Mitch McConnell de Kentucky.
Tipped the entire election. Nor can public doubt alone justify a radical break when the doubt itself was incited without any evidence. The Constitution gives us here in Congress a limited role. We cannot simply declare ourselves a national board of elections on steroids.
Habla Mitch McConnell de Kentucky.
The courts and the states,
líder de la mayoría del Senado, republicano.
they've all spoken. If we overrule them, it would damage our republic forever.
Reflexiona sobre la
This election
importancia
actually is
de
not unusually close.
respetar los votos
Just
en las
in recent
elecciones.
history, 1976, 2000, and 2004 were all closer than this one. The electoral college margin is almost identical to what it was in 2016. If this election were overturned by mere allegations from the losing side, our democracy would enter a death spiral.
Al parecer, Mitch McConnell no está muy de
We'd never see
acuerdo
the
con
whole
las
nation
objeciones
accept
de los republicanos.
An election again.
Bueno, vamos a ver qué es lo que dicen en su mismo
Every 4 years
partido.
would be a scramble for power.
Veamos, por otro lado, lo que
At any
sucede en las
cost.
afueras del Capitolio.
This side have been defending for years would cease to exist, leaving many of our states with no real say at all in choosing a president. The effects would go even beyond
Recordemos
the
que en
elections
este
themselves.
momento el debate que se estaba realizando
Self-government, my
en la Cámara de
colleagues, requires
Representantes fue
a shared
detenido
commitment
debido a
the
disturbios que se están realizando
on C-SPAN.
a
We'll
las
take you
afueras
back
del
live to the
Capitolio.
House
Mega
floor.
million lottery than you do having statistical issues here. Over 30,000 illegal aliens voted in Arizona using the federal ballot. Yet our Secretary of State refused the public access to review the ballots. Over 1,000 residences were visited for proof of residency and address. 456 failed that test. They were vacant lots. Even the recorder's office used as addresses. What are they hiding? If the process was fair, these would be improbable. These would be once-in-a-lifetime type applications. So let's look at the ballots, the signatures, and the adjudicated records. Until this is done, Mr. Speaker, we should not count this slate. You have a letter from the Arizona legislators stating its intent to review the issue on January 11th. Our governor has refused to allow the state to properly convene to do its proper oversight. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I ask you one question today. Are
Se
you a
dirige a los
ceremonial
representantes.
figurehead in your current
Paul
role,
Gosar,
or did the drafters of the 12th
representante del
Amendment
cuarto
and
distrito de
Congress in the
Arizona,
Electoral Count Act of
Paul Gosar,
1887
republicano.
envision a role where you made discretionary decisions about ballot fraud and fair elections? If you were merely ceremonial, then let's be done with this. Let's eat our tea and crumpets and witness our national decline. But if you're not merely a ceremonial but vested with discernment, rationality, and legal authority to not just count from 1 to 270, then do not accept Arizona's electors as certified. Remand the slate back to the Secretary of State, back to the governor with the following instructions. Until a full, complete electoral forensic audit is allowed by the Secretary of State, the electors currently certified will not be counted. It will then fall on the state of Arizona to decide, does its electors, are they in the game or not? Anything less is an abdication of our Constitution, our republic, and our ethos. One man, one vote. We ask why? What is there to hide? Shouldn't the lawful victor of an election be proud, open, transparent about an election audit? I would. Instead, we're met with denials, cover-ups, and contempt of subpoenas. There's too much evidence of fraud demonstrated by statistical anomalies that experts have determined cannot happen in the absence of fraud.
Paul Gosar, representante de Arizona, del cuarto distrito republicano.
Our beloved Constitution is but a mere piece of paper if we do not follow the law, upholding the law.
Se refiere a la importancia de respetar la Constitución y también las normas electorales de las legislaturas de los diferentes estados. Y fueron cambiadas días antes de las elecciones.
The gentleman's time has expired. Without objection, the House is going to go back into recess.
Nuevamente se pasa al receso. Reiteramos, esta situación es bastante complicada. Vamos a esperar una larga sesión. Hay hay personas del Partido Republicano que lograron entrar al Capitolio y que generaron algunos disturbios cuando se estaba dirigiendo hacia los representantes. El representante Paul Gosar de Arizona, del cuarto distrito republicano. Y ahí vemos algunos ciudadanos que se habrían trasladado de la marcha convocada por Donald Trump en la Casa Blanca, llegaron caminando hacia el Capitolio. Yo lo que me pregunto es, ¿cómo es que pueden entrar cuando se está haciendo una sesión tan delicada, tan compleja, y que requiere, por supuesto, máxima seguridad? No nos olvidemos que estamos viviendo tiempos bastante complejos con el tema de la pandemia y los recientes hechos producidos por el movimiento Black Lives Matter. Entonces, me pregunto yo, ¿por qué no existe la policía, la seguridad necesaria para evitar que estén estos ciudadanos alterando un poco el tema de la sesión del Congreso? Se ha tenido que paralizar el debate. Y no nos olvidemos que la certificación se hace estado por estado y que el tiempo para el debate por cada estado que vaya a ser objetado es de 2 horas. 2 horas para el debate de cada estado que vaya a ser objetado. En ese sentido, y tomando en cuenta esos parámetros, estaríamos pensando que por lo menos debe existir una sesión de al menos 12 horas. Al menos 12 horas, porque son 6 los estados que van a ser objetados. En este momento apenas han sido certificados 2 estados, Alabama y Alaska. Y son 12 votos electorales, 9 de Alabama, 3 de Alaska, que van a Donald Trump. El tercer estado, Arizona, que debía ser certificado, fue el primero en ser objetado. Perfecto, hasta ahí estamos bien. Pero no nos olvidemos que faltan todavía 5 estados más que van a ser objetados. El tiempo de 2 horas, me imagino que ya está cerca a concluirse y debería ya convocarse a nuevamente la sesión conjunta para poder reanudar la apertura de los sobres de los colegios electorales y de esa manera continuar con la certificación. En este momento estamos viendo imágenes a las afueras de la Cámara misma, la Cámara de Representantes del Salón, donde muchos partidarios del movimiento MAGA, Make America Great Again, de Donald Trump, han entrado al Capitolio. Bastante complejo. Parece que la policía ha sido rebasada. Y bueno, eso es lo que estamos viendo, ¿no? Una situación incómoda, compleja de los partidarios de Donald Trump en el Capitolio.
All right, we have learned now that as you can see, the protesters have breached the Capitol. They're inside. They're crossing over statuary.
We're not going to be successful on that, but I do think there are things that the vice president can do. It'll be interesting to see what he's going to do. He hasn't talked about specifically the direction he's going to take, and looking forward to being
Ahí estamos viendo las afueras también del Capitolio mientras se dirige a la prensa el congresista de la Florida, si no me equivoco. Y bueno, habíamos visto estas imágenes del interior de las instalaciones del Capitolio, donde las personas habrían logrado entrar. Y bueno, eso es algo que sabíamos que iba a ser un poco complejo, pero la sesión del Congreso va a terminar durando muchísimo. Si tienen 2 horas por cada estado, son 6 los estados, estaríamos hablando de al menos 12 horas de debate y por lo menos otras 2 horas de revisión de los conteos, 14 horas de sesión. Esa sesión ha comenzado a las 2 de la tarde, hora del Pacífico, 2 de la tarde, hora del Pacífico. Terminaría en la madrugada. Vamos a ver qué es lo que sucede. No nos olvidemos que estamos en un breve receso, un receso convocado en la Cámara de Representantes. Un receso en la Cámara de Representantes.
The effort to try to resolve some of these legal disputes on ongoing litigation. I was a litigator my entire time as a lawyer in Florida. I've been a lawyer for over 15 years, and you can't violate confidentiality when you're trying to resolve a case. That's very clear. You can get disbarred for it, and I think obviously this was 100% purely political on behalf of the Secretary of State or whoever it was that made this recording public. It should have never been recorded to begin with. And I think it's, again, the constant attacks that this president had to withstand for the last 4 years.
So do you think the way this last election played out is a reflection of these attacks as well?
I do, and if you look at in the states that we've had all of the problems, again, these are states that usurp the will of the legislature by allowing things like unverified mail-in ballots, which you don't know who they came from. You don't know if they're electors of those individual states or if they're even qualified to vote in those individual states, and that's hugely problematic. 1, for fair and free elections in our country, and 2, for the individual legislatures that have created law and for individual elected officials to just completely usurp the will of these individual state legislatures.
So, you know, we had yesterday a big election in Georgia, the runoffs. Do they have any implication on what's going to happen today or the decisions people will be making today, in your opinion?
Yeah, again, same thing. You saw Republican counties by like 9:30, 10 o'clock, 99% of the precincts reporting. In these democratically run bigger counties, like 30%.
Bien, al parecer la situación no ha cambiado. En este momento vemos todavía una importante multitud a las afueras del Capitolio. Se reanudó, se tuvo que reanudar la sesión de la Cámara de Representantes para que pueda terminar de hacer el uso de la palabra el representante Paul Gosar, que era la persona que hizo la objeción del estado de Arizona. En ese sentido, se entiende que se ha terminado, se ha concluido con el debate de la objeción presentada por la certificación del estado de Arizona, y se debería reanudar ahora la sesión conjunta, tanto del Senado como de la Cámara de Representantes, para poder continuar con la revisión de los otros estados, las certificaciones de los otros estados. Pero no nos olvidemos que eso está provocando una situación bastante compleja, una situación inevitablemente compleja dentro de el Capitolio mismo, porque han llegado cientos, tal vez miles de personas, podríamos decir, ahí a las afueras del Capitolio, para poder presenciar esto que está sucediendo en los Estados Unidos, en Washington, D.C. Por supuesto, cada uno tiene sus propias convicciones. Hay algunos que incluso hablan sobre la veracidad o no de las elecciones el día de ayer en el estado de Georgia, en donde durante todo el conteo estuvieron ganando los republicanos y posteriormente, de manera sorpresiva, al final del conteo aparecieron ganando los demócratas. Y con eso se ha generado prácticamente, si se ratifican los resultados que se están contabilizando ya en Georgia, tendría prácticamente concluido un empate en número de senadores, lo que habilitaría a la vicepresidenta para los desempates, dando de esa manera una mayoría innegable, un control del Senado también, ya lo tiene de la Cámara de Representantes, ahora sería un control también del Senado por parte de los demócratas en los Estados Unidos.
Any final thoughts?
Just thank you guys for what you do, and it's an honor to serve the citizens of the 17th District of Florida.
I'm here with Congressman Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania. Congressman Kelly, great to speak with you.
Thank you, Jan. Good to be with you.
Well, you know, Pennsylvania, I've been wanting to speak with someone from Pennsylvania pretty urgently because, of course, the state legislature is now requesting more time to basically look at this whole question of electors. Tell me about that.
Well, I think they recognize, they being the state legislature, that back in October of 2019, they made a huge mistake, and that's they changed our voting laws without doing an amendment, which would have been the proper way to do it. They just went ahead and changed our voting process, allowing the no excuse mail-in ballots, and they're now saying, wait a minute, that was a huge mistake. Let's take a look at it. And there's been so many irregularities that's taken place right across the board. They say, give us a little more time, let's investigate it. Let's make sure that what we're doing today doesn't forever give people get the point that they're not going to have any faith or trust in the system. So they say, let's stop now. Let's look at it so we can give our residents, our citizens, the opportunity to see that we're serious about this, and we're going to make sure that was done the right way and that every legitimate vote got counted.
Are you in communication with any of the state members, and what are they telling you, if so?
You know what? I have a lot of friends serving the state legislature, and obviously, why wouldn't we? Because we share a lot of the same constituents. I think what they're saying is there was a mistake made in Pennsylvania. And then to top it off, in addition to changing the voting process, then after that, our governor says, look,
el congresista Mike Kelly hace referencia a la votación en Pensilvania y por supuesto hay muchas observaciones. Lo extraño es que no se permitieron el avance de la revisión de estas observaciones. Por otro lado, estamos viendo la cantidad enorme de gente que se encuentra ahí a las afueras del Capitolio, en la parte. Ahora vemos que es en la parte externa, en la parte por donde se puede ingresar, pero no nos olvidemos que ahí están las salas, tanto del Senado como de la Cámara de Representantes, para poder hacer los debates, y por lo pronto está paralizado este debate que, recordemos, solo estábamos en el tercer estado, en el estado de Arizona, y ahí se paralizó por la objeción presentada por Paul Gosar, republicano de Arizona, apoyada por Ted Cruz, senador republicano de Texas.
And I'm guessing you're intending to object from what you're saying. And so what is the best case scenario for them and for you?
I think what we're looking at is a lot of...
Niels Lesniewski, do we know what kind of security precautions were put into place before today? And if Capitol Police were anticipating something like this, did they have extra resources on hand?
El tema de la seguridad, No nos olvidemos que, por supuesto, ha sido bastante complejo el tema de la seguridad en el edificio del Capitolio.
In fact, put up because the inauguration is coming. So there was already sort of an available enhanced security perimeter because of the preparations that were underway for the events on January 20th. So the Capitol was already sort of at a heightened state of security. And the other thing, which sort of has been going on for months now, obviously, is COVID. We had a situation where the building has largely been closed to the general public, except for people who have meetings with senators or staff. So things have not been open generally like they normally would be to the general public. Really since early in the pandemic. So that is part of also what's sort of going on here. I'm certain that there was an extra security presence today, but it clearly was not sufficient. And once we know, but I will say, the other thing I will say is that once we have better guidance on where the members of Congress and the Senate are able to assemble, what we actually have ability and Congress has the ability to actually convene in alternate locations. They're not even all in the Capitol building. And so, if we see the House or Senate reconvene, it is entirely possible that could happen, at least in terms of officially being able to gavel out or something like that. Could happen in an alternate location. You may remember, and viewers may remember, that actually did happen when the earthquake came through the National Capital Region a number of years ago, and the Senate actually convened briefly. It was only a pro forma session. There was no business. But the Senate has, in fact, been able to convene off-site in the not too
por lo
distant
pronto
past.
no se tiene
And we're learning from
avisorada
CNN
la
that,
reanudación
the Vice President has been
de la
evacuated
sesión
from the
del
Capitol
Congreso.
grounds.
No se
Matt
tiene
Fuller,
una idea
Niels
clara si
Lesniewski,
se
who
va a
you know
reanudar o
who
qué es lo que
reports
va a
for the Huffington
pasar.
Post. He just sent this out at 2:43. Guns
Ha
drawn
sorprendido a
in the
propios y
chamber.
extraños
John
esa
Bresnahan, who
irrupción en
reports
el
for
edificio del
Punchbowl News
Capitolio.
now, he
No,
sent
por
out a tweet
supuesto
about 2
no ha
minutes ago,
pasado a
crowd now trying
mayores
to
y no
break down
creo que
doors
llegue a pasar a
into
mayores, pero
the House chamber.
por
Obviously,
temas
we
de
don't-
seguridad
we
siempre
can't
es
see what's going
importante
on
mantener
inside these
la
chambers, as
seguridad.
both
En este
the House and
momento
the
hay
Senate,
ciertamente
are in recess. Matt Fuller now saying they're
miedo, me
shooting
imagino,
into the
situaciones de
chamber.
precaución por parte de los miembros de la Cámara de Representantes y del Senado. Hay que estar atentos, a ver qué es lo que pasa con
Matt Fuller, who
el
covers
avance de la sesión.
House for HuffPost, worked at Roll Call with me a number of years ago. And so what happened in this case was there were a lot of people who were actually evacuated into the chambers. And so now we are at the point where we have to talk about, the shooting of Capitol Police officers a number of years ago. And that is another thing. Now that we have apparently live fire, this situation has gotten even more complicated. And I do think that, we'll continue to update as we hear from what is happening. Lawmakers are now being evacuated out of the House chamber.
Yeah, Niels, I want to show video of tear gas in the Capitol. This is outside the House chamber.
Yep. On it.
And there were congressional media reports, Niels Lesniewski, of masks being distributed among the staff and the press up there because of the tear gas. So, Niels, it sounds like there's been reinforcements called to the Capitol.
Yep.
Niels Lesniewski, what do you know about your colleagues there and what they are inside the building? Have they said what they plan to do, or what can they do?
Well, right now, the immediate concern appears to be the armed standoff at the House front. That is, according to one of the members of our pool.
Al parecer, la policía está tratando de desalojar a los manifestantes con gas lacrimógeno. La policía está tratando de despejar a la gente que se encuentra ahí a las afueras y también en parte adentro del edificio. La policía ha sido rebasada, los guardias de seguridad también han sido rebasados. Imagino que llegarán pronto algunos refuerzos, porque no nos olvidemos que se trata de la seguridad de los representantes y los senadores de ambos partidos. También existe una gran cantidad de miembros de la prensa dentro del Capitolio en este momento. Totalmente inusual, totalmente sorprendente lo que está sucediendo en este momento dentro del Capitolio.
Obviously, we're asking you to give us insight on the fly here as we watch this scene unfold. Do you know what sort of authority Capitol Police have if I'm getting an emergency alert from the District of Columbia government on my phone as we talk? But do you know what sort of authority these Capitol Police officers have if these people were to get close to those in power? Oh, well, we lost Niels. We'll try to get him back, but that's the question I posed to him. The House and the Senate have recessed. They are subject to call of the chair. They've stopped their proceedings of tallying the votes of the Electoral College or hearing the objection over the Arizona Electoral College. What you're seeing right now is a video of the crowds crossing the street outside of where we are at, I believe. Is that right? Okay, so these are the crowds. You know, the crowds have been on Capitol Hill starting from very early this morning, as well as close to the White House, where the president addressed them earlier today. It seemed that a lot of those people then made their way up to the Capitol. And now we're in a situation where protesters have reached the Capitol, guns have been drawn, gas fire in the chamber, lawmakers being evacuated. As we sit here and wait for news of what's going to happen next, the D.C. mayor has called for a curfew starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We've learned that law enforcement up on Capitol Hill has called for reinforcements. Politico reported that the National Guard has been called to Capitol Hill. Scott Wong is joining us, a congressional reporter. Scott Wong, what do you know?
Greta, this is Niels Lesniewski back with you
Continúa la situación ahí afuera de la Cámara
well, both of you, hang on the line.
del
Scott Wong, let me go to
Capitolio.
you. Where are you,
No se
first
puede
of all?
reanudar la sesión del Congreso mientras continúen en esta
a couple floors down from the House floor on the House side. It
Parece que
is
va a
very
ser bastante
chaotic right now.
difícil la
There's a lot
reanudación.
of fear among all sides, police officers, reporters, staff, and certainly lawmakers. What I've seen so far is that some U.S. Capitol Police officers
Bien, nos acaba de llegar un reporte que al menos por las siguientes 2 horas no se va a reanudar la sesión del Congreso, porque se han lanzado gases lacrimógenos incluso adentro del Capitolio. Todavía hay gente dentro de las oficinas del Capitolio. Están siendo rebasados todos los miembros del personal de seguridad interna. La policía va a llegar, obviamente, pero se va a tardar un tiempo en reanudar las actividades. No es algo que se vaya a hacer fácilmente. Vemos que todavía sigue una gran cantidad de personas a las afueras de la Casa Blanca. Y eso es el estado de situación, por lo pronto. Eso es el estado de situación. No se va a reanudar, por lo pronto, según lo que se nos dice, por las próximas 2 horas. No se va a reanudar. Bien, vamos a estar atentos a ver qué es lo que pasa. Por lo pronto, no tenemos más que esto. Las imágenes que vemos, todavía hay un conjunto de gente afuera de la Casa Blanca. Por otro lado, vemos a las afueras del Capitolio también una importante cantidad de gente, tanto por supuesto como se encuentran a las afueras de la Casa Blanca.
From my vantage point, which is about a couple floors down from the House chamber itself. All I know is there is a heavy police presence, but also a lot of pandemonium, given that a number of police officers have been injured in this melee. And so it's not very organized at the moment, and it's very terrifying.
Scott Wong, obviously hoping you and everyone up there stays safe during this. Have you been told what happens next, or what the Capitol Police is doing right now to get this situation under control?
Not on any official level, just in very basic, quick conversations I had with the officers who we were assisting. They advised either that we shelter in place or that we try to move towards some of the House office buildings. But again, because there's not a whole lot of information, we are unclear about where exactly we should go. There also, about 45 minutes ago, was an announcement that came over the loudspeakers in the Capitol that talked about the external security threat. As you know already, the entire Capitol complex is on lockdown. People cannot come and go freely if you are somebody who works in the Capitol. So there's also the challenge of trying to figure out how to get out of here, whether by foot or by car, if the Capitol itself is on lockdown.
Scott Wong, talk about the protesters even getting onto the Capitol steps of the U.S. Capitol, where, as you know, if you're up there, you're not. Lawmakers are the only ones allowed on those steps.
It really is one of the most secure buildings in the country. There are people guarding the building at all times. To me, from how I'm looking at this, it seems that the Capitol Police chose not to engage and probably chose not to inflame the situation. There wasn't much resistance from the Capitol Police officers to the hundreds or thousands of protesters that are here on the grounds. They did earlier in the day try to keep those protesters at a distance with some external fencing around the perimeter, but clearly those perimeters were breached, and as we saw from some of the pictures,
bueno, vamos a estar atentos a esta información. Por lo pronto no hay nada más que reportar. Los manifestantes están a las afueras del Capitolio. No se va a reanudar la sesión del Congreso por al menos 2 horas, según lo que nos informan. Por al menos 2 horas. Solamente se han certificado 2 estados, Alabama y Alaska. El tercero que debía ser certificado, que era Arizona, ya fue objetado. Eso es lo que se estaba debatiendo al momento en el que ingresaron los manifestantes hasta el hemiciclo, hasta la sala misma de la Cámara de Representantes. Por lo pronto eso es todo lo que tenemos que actualizar. Vamos a paralizar ya esta emisión y en breve iniciamos con la que corresponda a la sesión del Senado. Estaremos atentos.